Romans 12, beginning at verse 9. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil and cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honour one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervour serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need, and practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who mourn. Mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it's possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, "It's mine to avenge, and I will repay." On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed them. If they're thirsty, give them something to drink. In doing this, you may be heaping burning coals on their heads. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Just before lockdown began, Sophia and I started to have piano lessons, kick-starting the part of my brain where I'd been learning music as a child, locked away memories from at least 2 decades ago. It means that my gentle attempts to be at least tuneful is often seasoned with those flurries of mistakes along the way. They may be mistakes to my teacher. I suggest they may be unintentional harmonies. But on good days, these flurries, these unintentional or intentioned harmonies add a level of musicality, those accidental moments of grace and blessing into a well-trodden melody. Jazz musicians in particular would recognise these as grace notes, an additional accompaniment to the whole, adding nuance and playfulness within the repertoire, and often used to change the key, to change the tone, to change the mood. These moments of serendipity, a word itself meaning gracious accident, and thus one of my favourites, is either an experience of brokenness, those mistakes that we try hard to work our way out, those that are hard to erase or hide from an examiner, the slip-ups that I continue to rehearse, or else they add beauty and colour within a piece of music. You see, grace notes are ways to help people hear and see more in the music itself, to hear new things in what has already become familiar, to be playful, and to remember that we are to live more lightly, more beautifully, a reminder that we live in a world which is already graced by grace. The theologian and writer Paul Tillich wrote last century, "Grace strikes us when we are in great pain and restlessness. It strikes us when we walk through the dark valley of meaninglessness and an empty life. It strikes us when we feel that our separation is deeper than usual because we've violated another life, a life which we loved or from which we were estranged. It strikes us when our disgust for our own being, our own indifference, our weakness, our hostility, our lack of direction, our composure has become intolerable to us. It strikes us when, year after year, the longed for perfection of life does not appear, when old compulsions reign within us as they haven't done for decades, or when despair destroys all joy and courage. Sometimes at that moment, a wave of light breaks into our darkness, and it's though a voice was saying, "You are accepted. You are accepted, accepted by that which is greater than you and the name by which you do not know." Do not ask for that name now. Perhaps you will find it later. Do not try anything new now. Perhaps you will do much later. Don't seek for anything. Don't perform anything. Don't intend anything. Simply accept the fact that you are accepted. So let's ponder a while. Let those words echo around your hearts and your minds. Take the promises within it, inviting you to play and to pray. For I think for those of us who are still living with the remnants of lockdown, those moments where we have been stripped away, where our separation from each other and from our church buildings is deeper than usual, when the life that we have loved is no more, there is a promise here that we too are accepted in this place, in this time, with these people. I wonder, when you have been struck by these grace notes of the kingdoms, grace notes written by God just for your noticing, you are accepted. The reading from Romans chapter 12 offers us an invitation to this grace-filled, lived lightly, deeply dug discipleship. It's a passage which invites us to think about what it means to be church, a question in the background of many of our policy conversations at the moment. What are the important values that the church community needs to live into when it's thriving? What are the deeper values of the Christian experience which is exposed when it's no longer contained by bricks and mortar and mission statements and risk assessments? It's an invitation to a graced way of living. Up until this point in the book of Romans, Paul has been encouraging the people of Rome to recognize God's grace, to be assured of it, to be certain of what they know and believe and the Jesus that they follow, in all the guises and graces that they have encountered God, with whatever powers and decisions which are enforced upon them by other people, within the complex ways of ruling and reign and regulations and emperors and religious authorities around them. Paul was still desperate for the people of Rome to know that they were known, named, and loved and accepted by the God who graced them, shows grace to them, provided grace for them, and enabled them to step into the grace offered to them within their community, the grace given to them by Jesus, a grace in which they are accepted. We can look at the book of Romans and assume it's a book about the rules, about the law. But what if the book of Romans is actually a book about grace? This passage in Romans chapter 12 is perhaps a hymn to the consequences of this knowledge. To live, to love, to play, to pray, and to be joyful and joy-filled. To notice the grace notes, to be kingdom graced. This part of Romans 12 is about how we live, deeply, livingly, counterculturally, passionately, compassionately, as a unified, transformative, change-making, risk-taking, attractional, missionary community of people, whatever circumstance we find ourselves in. From presidents to pandemics and every power in between. The invitation found here is to live, noticing, accepting, and offering words of grace. The poet-philosopher Rainer Rilke wrote, "Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books that are written in a foreign tongue. Do not now seek the answers which cannot be given to you, because you would not be able to live them. But the point is to live everything. Live the questions. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into your answers." The book of Romans invites the Roman people and us as Jesus following disciples into a graced living of questions. Be centered. Let everything we do flow out of our love for God, love for neighbour, and love for ourselves. Cling to the good. Don't be distracted by hurt or pain or conflict or despair. Follow those people who show love. Whether you agree with them or not, surround yourself with people who change the world for the better. Take a rest and know how to be present. Keep going even when everything seems to be falling apart. Pray and receive the grace notes of the kingdom. Offer hospitality to those who are different. Find solutions to conflict which offer healing, not further division. Maybe just be somebody to somebody. In the midst of a pandemic, these seem to be good principles of practical social work. But let's do them because we know Jesus and want others to know God's love too. As we notice God's grace notes for us, how can we offer them to other people around and about us? How might we be able to share the love of God with people who themselves are hurting and distanced and dislocated and lonely and burnt out and afraid? And how do we do that when we don't know who they are? Jan Richardson wrote the following story. Over the weekend, I was reading a book. I'd ordered it from the library. And as I opened the page, this small piece of paper fell out. On the front was a beautiful hand-drawn doodle. On the back, a handwritten note in beautiful calligraphy. "You're doing great," it said. "I hope you have a lovely day. I'm glad you found my doodle. Keep being awesome." For Jan Richardson, this person's anonymous thoughtfulness came as a grace note in her days and invited her to think about how she too might pass on a spirit of kindness. It reminded me of a small habit that I picked up when I was at college. I lived in a community house of 6 other people, and I used to tuck messages of prayers or of blessing into the coat pockets of anybody who would visit. I didn't pull out their wallets. I think that could have been an extension, but it did mean that I was offering a blessing into those people who came and visited our house together. A reminder that the next time they dug for their keys or their cash, they were loved in every midst of their mundanity. Keep being awesome. You're doing great. You are accepted. Whether you've made it just to the local store this week or whether you ran the local store, you're doing great. You are accepted whether you managed to get out of bed today or whether you've made the beds today. You're doing great, and you are accepted whether you are just barely breathing or whether you've spoken grace into every conflict that you see. You're doing great. You are accepted. You are named, known, and loved by the Creator of the world, who offers you grace notes to remind you to live lightly and beautifully and lovingly. In the midst of a pandemic, it can be hard to play and it can be hard to pray. It can be hard to laugh and find moments of joy. And the challenges of 2020, I fear, may only just be beginning. But let us steer a new course for our communities together. Love from the centre of who you are, don't fake it. Run for dear life from evil. Hold on to dear life to good. Be good friends who love each other deeply and practice playing second fiddle. I think the writer doesn't mean that literally. Don't burn out. Keep yourselves fueled and aflame. Be alert servants of the Master, cheerfully expectant. Don't quit in hard times. Pray all the harder. Help needy Christians. Be inventive in your hospitality. Bless your enemies. No cursing under your breath. Laugh with your friends when they're happy and share tears when they're down. Get along with each other and don't be stuck up. Make friends with nobodies. Don't be the great I am somebody. Don't hit back. Discover beauty in everyone. And if you've got it in you, get along with everybody. Don't insist on getting even. That's not for you to do. If you see your enemy hungry, buy that person lunch. If they're thirsty, buy them a drink. Your generosity will surprise them with goodness. Get the best of evil by doing good. So maybe these are the grace notes that we need for ourselves, for our communities, for our families, and for our futures. With Christ in the liminal spaces through this time of change, some questions still remain unanswered. Things lie unresolved when I had planned their resolution. There are surprises, some good and some so hard to swallow. And yet, when I pause to consider your call afresh, I note that you do not point to an easy path. Nor do you promise your world the ease that I so often seek. What you do give is deeper and more enduring. Love that casts out my fear. Peace that passes my understanding. Living water which refreshes the dryness of this soul. I need you every day, every hour, every moment. In you and only you I place my trust. In you I am accepted.